I'm Mike Ajachi, and this is Burden of Proof, where we'll be covering high-profile cases. It's the first full day of testimony in the trial against Duane Keffe D. Davis, accused of orchestrating Tupac's murder. I'm joined by two illustrious lawyers. To my right, criminal defense attorney Brian Buckmeyer. My man, I'm liking the green right now.
I like the illustrious shout-out. I mean, a lot of good evidence today, but don't get green with envy. I think the defense is going to win this one today.
Okay, we'll see. And to my left, we have Bernarda Villalona, current defense attorney, former prosecutor. How you doing?
That's right. So we saw a lot of duking it out today. That got us to here.
I know, we did. Are we ready to duke it out here?
Yes. Always ready.
Okay, I need a gavel or something like that the next time. All right, listen, before we get into all the legalities, the prosecution showed video to the court of Tupac with his Death Row Records crew in the MGM Grand on the night he was shot 30 years ago. It shows them fighting with Davis's nephew until security broke up the brawl. Then you see Tupac leading the group as they rushed out of the casino. Prosecutors say hours later, Davis provided the gun that shot Tupac. Davis is pleading not guilty here. Alex Stone joins us now with more on what happened in court. Alex, now we heard from security at casinos and law enforcement about the night of the shooting. How do they paint a picture of what happened?
Well, Ike, what they've really been trying to do is put all of this together for the jury from the beginning and then walk them through all of it. So they got into the video today of showing everything kind of ramping up, of Shakur and Suge Knight walking through the MGM lobby, and then the brawl. And you see it right here, the brawl going down and the kicking of Orlando Anderson. And their argument here, at least from the prosecution side, is that this is what led to the shooting, that then Duane Davis was angry about his nephew getting roughed up in this fight over a stolen gang item, allegedly. And then Duane Davis and Orlando Anderson went out and with two others and committed the murder. And now everybody else in the car, other than Duane Davis, everybody else is dead at this point, who was allegedly in the car, Duane Davis being the only one still alive. Orlando Anderson died in the 90s in another drive-by shooting, another gang shooting. But, there was a fight in Vegas that night. There was a lot going on. It was busy, and then the whole thing went down. But they really gave a tour of the old 90s MGM today, going through every aspect of what the hotel was like.
Now, Alex, during the medical examiner's testimony, graphic images of Tupac's body, they showed the jury and everybody in the courtroom, along with the tag from his body bag. What was that moment like in the courtroom?
Well, Tupac's family got up and left, and they had made it pretty clear that they were going to do that they were going to get up and get out of there before there were any graphic images shown. The first group of family members got up when this image was shown of the body bag with what ended up being the toe tag. That ended, according to the coroner, the medical examiner, that tag is what then is put on the body once they unseal the blue lock that's on the body bag. And then there were more graphic photos that were shown of his actual body, the entry wounds, the exit wounds, his face, his tattoos, and the family members were out of there at that point. We heard today from a current member of the medical examiner's office, because the medical examiner back in 1996 is now deceased. So they had a current medical examiner come in and describe what was in the medical examiner's report, talking about how the autopsy was done, how it goes down, what the findings were based on reading that report, because the coroner, the medical examiner from back then, is no longer around.
All right, Alex Stone, thank you. So how are the two sides battling to get the jury on their side? Let's find out in the segment we're calling Lawyer Up. Let's bring back in Brian and Bernarda. Brian will be giving the perspective of the defense, and Bernarda will handle the prosecution. You used to that?
I am. Makes you a better attorney. I know where it's coming from all sides.
We'll see. All right, Bernarda, I want to start with you, okay? Now, we saw that the prosecution played videos of Tupac's entourage attacking Davis, his nephew rather, in the MGM after the Tupac fight. So how does that factor into this case?
This is a major piece of evidence for the prosecution, because this 12-second fight sets the stage for this homicide to happen. So in terms of the prosecution, why they play the fight, they want to make sure, number one, they want to set the stage as to the motive. What led to the killing of Tupac? Why would Keffe D. Davis have any motive to actually go after Tupac and Suge Knight? So that that's number one. Number two, it goes to show the criminal gang aspect in the sense that, look, this was a beatdown, but behind the beatdown was something having to deal with a gang change or a gang symbol that was stolen prior to that date. And look, because of what happened, then the retaliation as a result of that. So it sets the stage for the homicide, and it also gives corroboration because Keffe D. Davis has said in the several statements that he's made that there was a big brawl and that his nephew, family blood, was the person that was actually beat up badly.
Now, Brian, you see what's happening right now. The prosecution, they're essentially trying to paint Davis as the orchestrator of this entire incident. As a defense lawyer, how would you go about countering that?
There's a big difference between retaliation and orchestrating it, right? Understanding, as Bernardo is articulating well, and then the prosecution as well, this is a family. This is a gang. This is a group. Now, I would talk to the jury in the same way. Think about it this way. If someone in your family got hurt, would you all need to come together and be like, hey, my little sister got picked on at school. Dad, what do you think we should do? All right, older brother, what do you think we should do? I think we should all go to the school and like do something about it. No, this is a group of people that you don't need a central person to organize this. They will act on their own. And as a defense attorney, I think you make the separation between retaliation and did Keffe D actually need to send orders for this to happen? Or did this gang of people who just do violence on their own do it on their own? There's a difference between retaliation and organizing it.
Absolutely. Now, Bernardo, we saw something graphic today. We saw those autopsy photos of Tupac. They were shown to the jury, very graphic. As a matter of fact, Tupac's family, you heard Alex Stone talking about it, they left the courtroom when those pictures came up. What's the purpose of those autopsy photos? What does that serve in this trial?
So you have to think the prosecution has the burden of proof of proving every element of the crime. And when it comes to homicide, one aspect that they must prove is that the person, their cause of death and manner of death, number one, manner of death is homicide, but cause of death is as a result of some criminality, here being multiple gunshot wounds to the body. So the prosecution has to call a doctor, a medical expert, to come in and testify that Tupac Shakur didn't die of natural causes, didn't die of suicide, didn't die as a result of an accident, but instead that he died as a result of a homicide at the hands of another person. So that's number one, the reason for that medical testimony. Number two, the prosecutor's kind of milking a bit, in terms of getting sympathy as to, look, you have a person that they died, look how they died, look how many injuries they actually sustained before dying, the suffering that they actually had to incur as a result of being shot. So that's number two. Number three, when we're talking about intent to kill, sometimes it's like, well, how do you know the person actually wanted to kill the person? Couple of ways. Number one, they used a deadly weapon. Number two, they used that deadly weapon. They didn't fire once. They didn't fire twice. They fired more than 3 times, showing their intent to actually kill that person and not merely just want to hurt them.
Now, Brian, I do want to bring up this point. The medical examiner brought in today testified about that autopsy. But here's something that I'm noticing in this trial, Brian. The medical examiner that they brought in today was still in med school at the time of this. A lot of people were either not born or very, very young at the time of this in terms of the experts that are bringing up. So does that speak to the difficulty in trying a 30-year-old case?
I was going to say, be careful, because I think we were younger.
Yeah, I might have been 8.
I think we were 8.
I was in college, but then again, I'm a Doogie Howser.
Bernardo, we don't have to show ourselves here. We'll keep it ambiguous.
So I think it's two things, right? It's clearly this person, was too young to actually know the full details of this. And so what you do is you say, okay, you aren't testifying about what you knew, what you did. You're clearly looking at the notes as someone else. And you have the opportunity not to attack the person and say, you messed up. You say, the best you can do is read someone else's notes. Do you know if this person did the right thing? Do you know if they wrote down everything they're supposed to? Do you know if they dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's? And the fact that they're kind of looking at someone else's homework, they can't answer that question. So you say, how complete could this be?
But I will say this, because again, I was a homicide prosecutor for 10 years. So usually, unfortunately, many times I've had to try cases where the person that performed the autopsy is no longer with the office, whether they moved out of the country, out of the state, or they're working just somewhere else and they're not available. So you'll have another medical examiner review the report. But what they're doing when they're reviewing the report, there's a lot of photos that are taken of the body. Internal photos, external photos. photos, and the doctors are basing their medical testimony based on reviewing those photos as well as the toxicology and then whatever notes that are available. But that's not an issue here because the cause of death is not an issue. If it was an issue as to whether it could have been an accident or suicide or homicide, then that would become a very big issue, but not in this case in terms of the medical examiner testimony.
But Bernardo, there is an issue that I'm starting to notice here. The defense is doing something very, very interesting. They're focusing on very small inconsistencies. Witnesses can't remember the caliber of the bullet that was used. Other little small things that are pointing to, I don't know if this is really true or not. So, Bernardo, do you think these inconsistencies result to some kind of reasonable doubt?
So as a trial attorney and the best of the trial attorneys who have the experience, you expect this. Right? You have to see it from both sides. You have to see the issues as they're coming. So this prosecutor, of course, I'm sure during jury selection, they dealt with, because it was 30 years ago, not everyone's memory is as clear as it was then. In fact, during opening statements, the prosecutor did deal with one of the inconsistencies, and that had to deal with the female that testified yesterday that she was in a car that approached Tupac and Suge Knight's car, that she had a different recollection as to what Tupac was doing when they first approached, as opposed to what Duane Keffe D. Davis said was happening.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens. Bernardo Villalona, Brian Buckmeyer, you guys stick around. We have a lot more coming up, all right? Okay, next. It's hard to talk about the death of Tupac without also mentioning the killing of Biggie Smalls. Why both cases are coming up on this current trial. Welcome back to Burden of Proof as we look closer at the second day of testimony in the trial of Duane Keffe D. Davis, the only man ever charged in the death of legendary rapper Tupac Shakur. Davis has pleaded not guilty. All right, let's bring back in our players, Brian and Bernardo. Bernardo, I want to start with you again. Now, we heard prosecutors play recordings of Davis talking to detectives about the killing of Biggie Smalls, something that happened basically 6 months after the death of Tupac. Now, these two stories, these two iconic rappers, they will forever be intertwined in pop culture. But what's the relevance of Biggie Smalls' death with regards to this trial?
So Biggie Smalls' death was crucial. I mean, I remember where I was when I got the call. But we don't get to Keffe D. Davis in terms of Detective Greg Kading doing an investigation having to deal with Keffe D. Davis if they weren't investigating Biggie's death. So originally a task force was formed in California to investigate Biggie's death. And what they found is that there was some kind of similarities between the two, and that Keffe D's vehicle, he possessed a vehicle that some witnesses say that was leaving the scene. So they ultimately went to Keffe D. Davis, and that's how they got him to come into the office and start talking to him. But what the detective realized was like, wait, if we want to get some leverage over him, we got to build a case around him. And that's how they got that big drug case around him and got him to start talking.
Now, Brian, the prosecutors about that case, they're going to call in the head of that task force, Greg Kading, to testify. What are they hoping to establish with this testimony?
So I think there's a number of things, and we're seeing with these witnesses that are coming forward so far is they're creating a narrative, right? As we have understood this case for many years, the jurors now have to understand it as well in the same kind of subject line, in the sense of this is how it started. This is how we did this investigation. This is how we came across Keffe D. This is why we asked him questions. This is how we got to the conclusion that he is our guy. And we're still doing that story here. And in creating the task force, in doing the investigation, in building the case, why did we ask questions of Keffe D? And then what did he say in response? Because don't forget, this case in large part is about his words. But the defense is also going to have the opportunity to say, but you fell short. Like, there's a reason, again, this case didn't happen 30 years ago. So why did you fall short?
What about you know is what you can prove.
And we can prove that he took the file and left and said, you ain't looking at my pieces, go. And his incompetency is going to be a big part of this case for the defense.
You think so too, Bernardo?
Oh, absolutely will be a big part of it. But that's why the prosecution has to be very thorough about owning up to the incompetencies, the politics, the time passing, the snitches get stitches mentality, the criminal gang. It's so much you have to educate this jury on, and only a competent, very versed trial attorney can bring that to a jury.
It's a long list of things the jurors have to overcome in order to get a guilty verdict.
All right, we'll see. Bernardo Villalona, Brian Buckmeyer, you guys stay here. We got some more coming up, all right? Okay, the latest on Lindsay Clancy, standing trial for the murders of her 3 children. What a doctor is telling us about postpartum psychosis, plus the legal strategy to convince the jury Clancy suffered from it. Now to On the Docket, where we cover other high-profile cases. And today, testimony in the trial of a Massachusetts mother accused of murdering her 3 kids continued. During questioning by the defense, psychiatrist Dr. Donald Condi testified about his review of Lindsay Clancy's medical records and said she was suffering from anxiety, brain fog, and other symptoms of postpartum depression.
It can mean that people feel like things around them are not real.
Right, and that's a pretty serious feeling to have, right?
It is.
And that's pretty common, unfortunately, with women that have postpartum psychosis, right?
It certainly can be, yes.
Postpartum psychosis. So let's talk more about understanding and treating this. I want to bring in Dr. Sarah Orrick, a psychiatrist and therapist who focuses on women's mental health and wellness. Dr. Orrick, thanks for joining us here on Burden of Proof. The Lindsay Clancy trial is putting a spotlight on postpartum psychosis. How often is a diagnosis of postpartum psychosis missed or misdiagnosed as postpartum depression? And what's the difference there?
Oh, absolutely. So postpartum psychosis happens in about 1 in 1,000 births. So it isn't as frequent as postpartum depression, which happens in about 1 in 8. But I actually think that number is higher, about probably 1 in 5 women who give birth. And it's one of the biggest complications of childbirth. So postpartum psychosis is really a break with reality. There's paranoia, there's waxing and waning of consciousness. It's really a very serious diagnosis that's a psychiatric emergency. Postpartum depression, we know, happens with a little bit more frequency. It can be mild, moderate, or severe. And again, that's what most people are kind of acquainted with. Postpartum psychosis is a little bit more rare. And so sometimes you have clinicians that have never seen it and perhaps don't know how to spot it.
Now, Dr. Orrick, Lindsay Clancy was on 13 different medications. Is there a risk of mixing medications like this?
Of course there are. I don't think that she was on the 13 simultaneously. I think these are all trials, and it seems from the details I've gleaned that she wasn't taking all of the medications or didn't do full trials of each. This was someone who I think was hesitant and scared to take medications, and so would try some things for a few days, get side effects. Potentially one of the medications, the antidepressant she was on, made her symptoms worse, and that was the indication that perhaps there was an underlying bipolar disorder, or for people with postpartum psychosis, sometimes an antidepressant can make them more agitated than they already are, have more insomnia, which is really problematic in these cases. So again, I don't think she was on all 13, and it was really, in some ways, too many clinicians, too many cooks in the kitchen, and no one was talking to each other.
Now, Dr. Orrick, how important is it for women to discuss their feelings with a doctor, a spouse, or a partner as soon as they feel off?
It's incredibly important. And I think it's also the responsibility of the family, of the partners, to say, hey, you're a little bit confused, or this is sounding really scary. What do you mean you're having thoughts about wanting to hurt our children? And really raising the alarm bells. Again, this is a psychiatric emergency. You should go to the nearest emergency room. A hospitalization is indicated. And once treated appropriately, like every case that I have been involved in, people go back to their baseline. They're able to return to their lives. Infanticide is something that happens very, very rarely. And I think that's important to talk about because we see these sensational cases, of course, but most cases of postpartum psychosis, 98%, people return to their baseline.
All right, Dr. Sarah Orrick, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, let's get back to Brian and Bernarda here. Bernarda, I want to start with you. We're seeing text messages between Lindsay Clancy and her former mother-in-law showing them discussing the medications, which Clancy actually blames for her decline. So with several others also saying Clancy was struggling mentally, what's the strategy for the prosecution on cross-examination here?
So the strategy for the prosecution is one, they are acknowledging that she had mental health issues. The question for the jury is not whether she had mental health issues, is whether at the time that she decided to strangle her 3 children, is whether she was going through a postpartum psychosis at that moment. What is more important in terms of, I think, that the jury's going to be requesting in this case that can give us insight at that exact moment how she was feeling was that phone call to her husband. Because it was doing that phone call to her husband, my understanding from the timeline, from the cell site data that they were able to retrieve, is that she was going up the steps and now at that point going into her room. So she had already killed her children, or shortly before that, or shortly after. So that's going to be the biggest focus for the prosecution.
Yeah, Brian, and you heard what Bernarda just said, Brian, how she was feeling on that phone call. What do you think of the defense's strategy of not really arguing whether or not she killed the children and instead focusing on her state of mind?
I think it's smart because it gives them a sense of credibility, right? The evidence is what it is. And I know my sister has called me and said, Brian, I'm looking at TikTok. I think Patrick did it. And I see people circling around that kind of conspiracy. The defense is clearly sidestepping that and saying, my focus here is on the defense, and that being a lack of criminal intent, or as they call it in other states, insanity. And I think it lends itself credibility to say, we are focusing on her mental health. The evidence suggests that she killed the children, but what was she thinking at the time? And with psychosis, you have the waxing and waning, so you're sometimes great. You're okay. Other moments, you're not. And they're saying at this time, she was not okay, and that's why she is not criminally liable.
All right, now this last question, this is for both of you real quick. I want like a sentence here, okay? What's the biggest challenge for both sides? Brian, let's start with you.
I think the biggest challenge here is you have to believe that a woman was in her right mind when she killed her 3 children. And I think anyone that has children and heard how her family talked about her, how her ex-husband talked about her, is going to say, that doesn't make sense. Something must have been off. It must have been some sort of psychosis.
Bernarda?
Biggest challenge for the defense is that she saw and got mental health treatment. I believe it was a session she had the day before, and she never mentioned she had suicidal ideation or she had any intent to harm her kids.
Okay. Bernarda Villalona, Brian Buckmeyer, I'm liking this. We'll do this again soon, okay? Thanks a lot, you guys. And thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Ajachi. We'll be here live every day with new episodes right here on ABC News Live at 5:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. And if you missed any part of today's episode, you can check it out on demand on Disney Plus, Hulu, or wherever you listen to your podcast by searching Burden of Proof.